So we heard and saw the story of this certain rich man who had this extra bounty of food. His harvest provided so much. And he looked at it and he said, "Where am I going to put all this?" And as the kids asked, did he give it to his neighbors? No. Did he give it to the church? No. It doesn't seem like he even thought about sharing it. Instead, he spent all his time and energy and money building bigger and better storage options. And then he dropped dead, as you saw. Now, what will happen to all that food? Will strangers get it? Will it go to waste? He can't take it with him. Today's gospel comes in the form of a warning. Don't worry about what your life, you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. There is more to life than food, and more to the body than clothing. So I want you to picture this scene. The crowd Jesus is addressing is filled with laborers. They're farmers and fishermen. They're people who are scraping by from paycheck to paycheck, so to speak. So what does this story about a rich fool have to do with them? There's no rich fool in this crowd. Quite the opposite. Most of these people are just one bad harvest or one terrible night's fishing away from poverty. They have families to feed. They have growing children. How can they not worry about whether they will have food to eat or clothes to wear? Consider the ravens, Jesus says. They do not sow or reap. They have no storerooms or barns, yet God feeds them, and you are much more valuable than birds. It's interesting that Jesus compares these people to ravens. It's an important piece of the puzzle that we need to understand the context of this reference. The people Jesus was addressing that day, they knew their scriptures. They understood that there were certain dietary laws, and the animals, some of them were considered clean and some were considered unclean. In Leviticus chapter 11, there's a long list of animals that are unclean. Many of them are birds of prey and scavengers. And the list includes eagles, vultures, and ravens. They are unclean. They are not fit for consumption. We are to avoid them. And yet, God feeds them. God cares for them. You are worth more than many birds, so what will God do for you? So what does a rich man have to do with ravens? It's an interesting contrast. The raven knows what it needs. It needs food, it needs water, it needs a place to stay out of the rain. There's only one way for the raven to get that. God provides it. The rich man, he can begin to imagine what he wants, but he doesn't seem to even stop and consider what it is he actually needs. He doesn't think about the Lord. The raven doesn't have that luxury because it has to focus on the needs. So it actually has an advantage because it must trust in the Lord. And then after he talks about ravens, Jesus starts talking about the lilies, and he compares their beauty to King Solomon in all his wealth and splendor. Do you remember King Solomon? He was richer and wiser than any other king in the world. Every year, King Solomon received 25 tons of gold. He had a large throne. It was covered with ivory and gold. It was the first and only of its kind. No one else ever had a throne like it. All of his drinking cups were made of gold, and when people would come for feasts to dine at his house, all of the utensils were also made of gold. He had a fleet of ships that would go out to sea and bring back exotic goods from other lands. He was supreme ruler of all the kings in the territory, and other kings and rulers would come from far away, like the Queen of Sheba, and bring him gifts. They came to honor Solomon, but they also came to seek his counsel. Solomon lived in splendor. He was surrounded by beauty. Yet, Jesus says, the lilies, which are clothed by God, far surpass that beauty. Even the grass, whose ultimate destiny is simply to be thrown into the fire to serve as fuel. During its short lifespan, it's dressed beautifully. You have a much greater purpose than grass. How much more will God clothe you? Solomon was rich indeed, but he was also wise. In fact, his wisdom, which was given to him by God, was his most valuable possession. It's the reason that people would come from so far away. Wealthy, well-respected rulers came and consulted with him because he had something that they lacked. They had wealth and status and power, but something was missing. And Solomon had that something, and it was wisdom. Wisdom that seemed otherworldly, and that's because it was. The wisdom Solomon had came straight from God. Jesus tells us, don't spend your lives in worry and fear, because that is what the Gentiles do. That's what people of this world do. But people of God's kingdom know that there is plenty to go around. There's more than enough for everyone. This is the gospel promise. This is the good news. And it's also a tough lesson in spiritual growth. Don't worry about what you will eat, what you will wear. I've been wrestling with this text all week, and if you don't want me to, I'm still going to be completely honest with you. I kind of hate it. It's a tough one. If you're having a hard time with it, then we're in it together. Trusting in God to provide is really hard. I know what my family's basic needs are. What kind of parent would I be if I didn't know those needs and hope to provide them? But this is the lesson. God will provide what we need to survive, and when we don't need to worry about basic survival, that's when we are free to turn to spiritual matters. That's when we can begin to grow in faith. And the amazing thing is that when we grow in faith, it leads us to worry less. And when we worry less, we grow in faith. And then we worry even less. And it goes on and on. God says to us, you have what you need. Like the ravens, like the lilies. Don't worry. Trust. Live fully. Embrace those around you and let them embrace you. As we continue our Imagine Appeal and beyond in our life together as a congregation, I believe that we can trust in what God is saying today. We have what we need. We will go forward together in faith, and God will provide. So let us place ourselves in God's care, because this is faith. Amen.